My name is Carlo Cavallone. I'm the Executive Creative Director of 72andSunny in Amsterdam. I'm originally Italian, but I've been working outside Italy for the last 15 years. And I'm almost a Dutch citizen at the moment. Yeah, I started working in advertising because I like pop culture a lot. And when I was in school, at university, I started working as a comic book translator. And on the side, I was doing a lot of things that were related to pop culture. I would publish a fanzine. I would organize film festivals. I would shoot my own little science fiction films. I went to film school for a while in the States. And then when I came back, I realized that there was a job that could actually put everything together in an interesting way. So I applied for an internship in an agency in Milan in 1996. I thought it would be for 3 months. It ended up being 19 years today. So it just came from the fact that I was really interested in pop culture, in entertainment, and I wanted to do things in that field. I think my first internet browser experiences were back in '94. When I was doing my publishing this fanzine with some friends of mine. We started using a Mac. I think it was a Mac LC2, one of those boxy things. We had all our design programs like Quark Express, very old things now. And we had a browser, and I remember it took forever to load pages. I think what was really incredible was for me when I realized that actually the websites you could access were not just in Italy, but you could go anywhere with it. So I could go on the New York Times from my living room, and of course it would take forever. But it was a great experience. I had an interview at Wieden+Kennedy because I was interested in things that weren't specifically related to advertising, and I think when I showed up there, they were really interested in my fanzine and the fact that I was doing short films. I was also doing illustrations myself, cartoons, and then of course I had done some work in Italy in advertising, but I think the key for me was the fact that people at Wieden+Kennedy were interesting for people that don't just focus on advertising, but have more experiences outside, have more passions, and seem to be, broader creatives. And then the other thing that was defining for me, and I was quite lucky, is the fact that they were looking for people to work on Nike, and I had a past as a rugby player. I played rugby for 16 years, so I knew sport quite well, and they were looking for a writer that knows pop culture, knows sport. They were looking for someone to work on digital, and I was really into digital and video games, and I was a combination of all these things, and I was lucky that I just appeared at the right moment. And in fact, I started working at Wieden+Kennedy in 2001 as a digital creative, and then I moved on to be a writer, a more classic advertising writer. But yeah, it was a combination of all things. So what I would suggest to people is just keep working on the things that you care about, you are passionate about. Don't just focus on putting together an advertising book, but if you like to paint. If you like to do little short films or take pictures, do it, because I think it all will make you richer. It will make you more interesting, and it also will make your skills better, because I think in my experience, before even starting to work in advertising and before even going to Wieden and Kennedy, I edited and and shot films, and I publish a magazine, I could illustrate, so a lot of things I didn't have to learn. I was just doing them. So so you don't have to wait for an advertising agency to teach you things. You can bring those things into an advertising agency. I go with the one that inspired me the most, which is actually made by the people who then founded 72andSunny, where I work now. And I'm not doing it because they are at 72andSunny, but because I really loved it. And it was 1998. It was a commercial campaign for the World Cup in France. It's a commercial called Airport, and you have the Brazilian team playing football in an airport. It's just when I saw that commercial in a movie theater in Milan, I was like, oh, this is what I want to do with my life. And I think I was lucky enough to end up working with the people who made that. So it was I would say that one for me. And then of course Nike is done, and still they make the best sport campaigns, and I can name 10 campaigns that are great, but it's for me it was that one emotionally. Yeah, I think the Olympics are a big event also for agencies, for sure. For me, in the last two Olympics actually, Procter & Gamble is for sure a brand that has found a really interesting insight with the MUMS campaign, the hardest job in the world. They had it in the Summer Olympics in London, and then in Sochi they repeated it. I think it's a good campaign because it feels like it's coming from a honest insight, and it's a good emotional message. And then apart from that, you have great campaigns, but sometimes you also have brands that just use the Olympics as a metaphor, and the athletes deliver great performance, we deliver great performance, so it's not very credible. I am one of those people that don't look at advertising a lot. Sometimes people ask me, what do you think of this commercial, and I haven't seen it. And I don't do it because I'm hate it, or because I'm a snob, or because it's just for two reasons. I don't have time to look at a lot of advertising, and two, once I interviewed the movie director in Italy for my magazine, and he told me something that was really interesting, is that he found inspiration in the fact of not watching other people's movies, because whenever he had the beginning of idea, someone would tell him, oh, but it's in that movie, and then he would think that the idea was not original anymore. I think in advertising it's really easy to fall in the same problem, to have the same problem. You start thinking about something, and then someone tells you, oh, but in 1995 there was this commercial that was the same thing. And I think I'd rather not know, and I think it's really hard to be original in advertising. A lot of things have been done, but I think if you keep yourself a bit stupid and you don't know too much about what happens, maybe you have a better chance to express yourself personally. So I don't hate advertising, of course, but I don't look at it a lot. I prefer to watch movies or television or read books. Well, where I work, now at 72andSunny, we are a medium-sized agency, I would say. We're about 100 people in Amsterdam. And our structure is really flat, really, we don't have a lot of hierarchies. And I really like that. In my past experiences, I worked in a couple of network agencies before, and then I worked at Wieden and Kennedy. I think it's really whatever works. I mean, I'm more of a fan of structures that are not too structured, and I think what I experienced in the biggest network agency I worked in was that too much structure and too much division eventually creates a problem, which is that people don't feel responsible for the work. So it just becomes like the creatives do something, and then the brand people, the account people do something here, but the process and the structure is not helping communication. And I think that on the long run, I think creates a system where people just don't really work together, don't feel responsible for the creative work in the same way. So I prefer a little structure, and I prefer a place where everybody is always like we do at 72andSunny, where everybody is always kind of together, collaborating around the work. I think it's always good to have teams that around brands, like we work on Samsung and Google and Smirnoff, and we have teams around those brands. But then I think it's also good for people to, at some point in their career and their time in an agency, to move around in different teams. Myself, for example, I worked a long time on the same brand at some point, which was Nike, and then which was great because I learned a lot about the brand. So you need to work in a team as long as possible to know the brand and be part of it. But then you, as a creative, but not only, you also need to move on. Like, for example, we work quite a lot with Google. It's great to have people that are very knowledgeable of Google, but it's also good that if after a while these people maybe move on and try other things and maybe go back to work on, it feels like it's good to have, again, teams around a brand, but it's also good that if this to recompose these teams and let people move around a bit. We started when we worked on Benetton on that campaign, and the following campaign was always a collaboration also with Fabrica, which is the internal group. And in this collaboration, we would tackle briefs that are what they call social, so it's not connected to product. And the briefs we would get included the one that became the Unhate campaign, were very large, very broad. They would be more about the theme that Benetton wanted to talk about. Because the really interesting thing about Benetton as a brand and the work they've done with Fabrica through the years, and then we help them with, is they want to have a point of view. They always want to start from a point of view. So their briefs are not so much, there are not many details, but there is always a clearly expressed point of view. And they want the advertising to be the voice of the brand. So it wasn't restrictive or prescriptive at all as a brief. It was very, very large, and then we could choose. We worked together to an expression, and then we worked together on what kind of media we wanted to use. And when we started to think about the media, of course, we wanted to use media that was a bit more modern and a bit more flexible. Of course, they didn't want to invest a lot of money just doing television or classic things, and so they preferred to do something that was more guerrilla or PR. And so it was just an evolution, but it started this wide, and then it became this small, which I like as an approach. Sometimes you get briefs that are a bit too prescriptive, and people and brands start, from the idea that they really want to be on TV, or maybe they don't need it. So with Benetton, it's quite the opposite. I think they just want to say something, and then you have to choose how to say it. We brainstormed for a few days without actually writing anything or doing anything. And then what I've done personally, I went back to read a book written by Tibor Kalman, which was one of the founders of Colors magazine. And it was a Hungarian designer, and he wrote a manifesto in the book that was really, really interesting, that talked about diversity and the fact that what Benetton loves is diversity. Diversity is a good thing. And then if you read the manifesto and if you look at Tibor Kalman's work, you see a lot of things that are provocative, but they want to be also clever, like they're clever juxtapositions of things. So I think the idea of Unhate came from the DNA of Benetton, and how they were talking about tolerance. They were talking about tolerance in a way that was fun. It wasn't like, probably Coca-Cola would tell you, go out and love each other. Benetton could tell you more like, well, don't hate each other. It's a bit more realistic, no? And then that's where Unhate came from. And the kissing idea came from ideas that were really part of the Benetton DNA, and people that it was kind of in the air, and then when we came up with it was like when we put the two things together, the campaign was made. When the campaign launched, we were expecting reactions, and the only reaction that was the legal consequences was from the Vatican, and it was in the news. And Father Lombardi, which was the spokesperson for the Vatican, asked to pull the campaign, and so Benetton immediately did it, and then of course the legal conversation continued between Benetton and the Vatican, and I actually don't even know how it ended up. But in our experience, we were expecting reactions. I wasn't expecting that reaction. I was expecting other reactions. I was more worried personally about maybe the Muslim community, and I was more worried about Obama. There were worries about how China could react. It's very important to understand if what you are doing has the potential to become newsworthy and to be talked about. In our experience, we always try to make it happen, and it's not just about being provocative. Sometimes it's just being sure that what you do corresponds to what the media are talking about, or it's it's part of what happens in the cultural calendar of a place, and generally, you have to make sure that you will get what you do will be amplified by news, but not only news. By the web in general. You have to try to get there, because otherwise it's not in how modern communication works. You run the risk of investing a lot of money or even a little money into something that will just disappear. I think Samsung, they have a good track record of sponsoring sports and getting involved with sport. I think the good thing with Surf is that they got into that relationship in a very humble way. They're not the Surf brand, of course. So we had them to find a connection with the athletes and with the tour. I think as a technology brand, of course, they are. They wanna be part of this. They wanna put in this relationship also their product, their technology, and I think that's why they make more and more. They will make waterproof hardware. I think they are, from what I know, they are also working with athletes to develop product. So I think they try to be in non-superficial in this relationship, which is really important for a brand. Again, if you come into surfing, you have to bring something to the party. You cannot just put your logo on the beach and say, "Hey, Samsung sponsored the tour, and I think they're approaching it the right way. It's going to be slow because, of course, surf is a very important thing. It's a very big movement, and Samsung just started to work with them. But I think if you see from what they've done with in general with other sports, and we work with them for the Paralympics, the Olympics, when they come into the sport, they try to stay. They don't just come and go. And even the Paralympics, for example, was interesting for us to work with them because they actually have a really good program of supporting athletes, Paralympic athletes in a lot of countries. So it's a real commitment. It's not just like paying money to the organization. So we'll see where the relationship goes. Yeah, I think it's really important. Again, for a brand like Samsung, it's really important to be in culture and be have a relationship with iconic musicians like Jay-Z. I think what's interesting with the project we done with him is that you could see that there was a benefit for everybody. I think I think again Samsung came in a smart way. I think in a way that felt credible because they offered him a platform to distribute his album through mobile. So you could see there was something interesting for the artist himself. And on the other hand, Samsung was people acknowledged that the role of Samsung in that relationship was good, was credible because they were giving something to the fans. And I think the model of that project is a very good model because a lot of time you see in advertising in Europe, but also, especially also in America though, that where you have celebrities, but are these celebrities really credible for the brand, or are just they paid to show up in a commercial, or what's the brand has to do with them? So I think it's again in modern communication. I think we have to work harder when we involve a celebrity or an icon in something, because now the audience will ask questions about why is this person doing this, or what's the connection there. There's not anymore that people see a celebrity and then say okay, whatever you say. It was. For Samsung to connect to Jay-Z was somehow a new thing, but what if Jay-Z fans would say, oh, what is Jay-Z doing with Samsung? So you always have to in consideration how the audience will react in this relationship. So you have to be careful and work hard to make it real and credible and interesting. In general, in advertising, I think that is happening a lot. And I think it's a good trend is that brands are starting to be more serious about what you could call brand citizenship, meaning the fact that they are entities that operate in the real world, and so if they talk about a cause, or then they have to act for that cause. And I think you had really interesting campaigns already this year or last year. The Like a Girl campaign for Always, that where you start to see brands having a point of view, talking about an issue, but then they continue to talk about the issue, and then they start to do something about that issue. It's a bit the model we wanted to create for Benetton. Like, you talk about tolerance, then you have to act, or you talk about unemployment, then you have to act. And I see more and more brands will try to do that, and which is a great thing, that brands become responsible and go a little bit beyond the message into acts and facts.